On the morning of his son's Navy SEAL graduation, a quiet janitor in a faded uniform took a seat far from the crowd, unnoticed, unimportant, just a father hoping to witness one proud moment. But when a Navy Admiral caught sight of the tattoo hidden beneath his sleeve, she froze. And the truth that followed would shake the entire base, reunite a broken past, and reveal a hero no one ever expected. Before we step into this unforgettable journey of courage, fatherhood, and the quiet strength of a man who spent years hiding from his own legend, we'd be honored to have you join our channel. If stories of hope, kindness, and second chances speak to you, feel welcome to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. The morning sun hung low over Naval Base Coronado, casting long golden stripes across the parade grounds. Rows of chairs had been neatly arranged, flags were fluttering at perfect angles, and proud families were already taking their seats, each face glowing with anticipation. Today was Bud's graduation, a day of triumph, a day of legacy. But at the far edge of the base, past the hum of excitement and polished dress shoes, a lone man approached the front gate, with steps that were quiet and steady, almost too steady for a day like this. Mason Cole wore a faded green janitorial shirt, sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms. His boots were scuffed soles thinning. A few oil stains marked his shirt pocket, and the ID badge clipped to his belt swing had been taped together more than once. His beard was neat, though silver threaded through it, and his long dark hair brushed the shoulders of his worn uniform. His hand, steady, capable, scarred, held a folded invitation paper creased from being opened too many times. Two young gate guards straightened when they saw him. "Sir, this area is restricted," one said. Lifting a hand, "I'm here for the graduation," Mason replied, voice calm, steady. Too steady. "My son, Aiden Cole." The younger guard glanced over Mason's attire, a janitor's uniform for an entirely different building, not the dress clothes of a typical parent on graduation day. His eyes narrowed. "Do you have an official pass?" Mason held out the invitation. The guard scanned it, frowned, then looked Mason up and down again. "You sure you're in the right place? This is Bud's, not a general base tour." The other guard leaned closer. Parents usually dress for the occasion. Mason's lips curved in something between a patient smile and quiet resignation. "This is the best I've got." There was no anger in his voice, no defensiveness, just honesty. The guards exchanged a glance, one that said, "This guy doesn't belong." They stepped aside, but their hands remained on their belts, uncertain. "Sir, we're gonna need to check with our supervisor," the first guard said. "Until then, we can't let you through." Mason nodded once. No protest, no explanation. He simply accepted it the way he accepted everything life threw his way, with a stillness that came from surviving worse burdens than social judgment. "Would it be all right if I sit?" he asked quietly. The guards hesitated. "Sit." Mason pointed to an unused metal folding chair leaning near a supply cart. "Just need a place out of the way." The guard, slightly embarrassed, nodded. Sure, I guess." Mason picked up the chair, carried it, limping just slightly to the outermost corner of the courtyard, far from the crowd and the banners and the families snapping photos. He set the chair down at the very edge of the fence line, folded himself into it, clasped his hands between his knees, and exhaled a slow breath. He didn't look disappointed. He looked grateful. He was close enough to hear the ceremony. That was enough. From the distance, other parents glanced his way, unsure who the quiet man in the janitor's uniform was. A few children stared at the tattoos, peeking from beneath his sleeves, intricate faded waves of ink that wrapped his forearm like stories time had tried to erase. Mason sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on the empty stage where the graduates would soon stand. His chest lifted with slow, measured breaths, not from nerves, not from sadness, but from something deeper, something older. "You made it, kid," he thought silently. "And I'm here. Just like I promised." For years, every paycheck he earned from sweeping floors, cleaning hallways, and repairing broken pipes had gone toward supporting Aiden. Every late-night shift he picked up was so Aiden could chase a dream Mason once walked away from. He didn't need applause today. He didn't need recognition. He didn't need anyone to know who he had once been. All he wanted was to witness his son's moment. To Mason, that was enough. Across the base, behind a row of bleachers, Aiden Cole stood tall in his crisp dress, Blue's chin, raised eyes forward. He looked every inch a Navy SEAL, strength in his posture, focus in his gaze. But beneath that disciplined exterior, something tugged at him, a quiet restlessness. His teammates murmured around him jokes, nerves, pride. But Aiden's eyes scanned the crowd relentlessly. Looking for somebody, one of his teammates asked, nudging him. Aiden offered a half smile. "Yeah, my dad. Which one is he?" another asked. Aiden chuckled quietly. "If you see a man who looks like he just walked out of a maintenance room, that's him." The team laughed softly, but there was admiration in their eyes. They'd all heard pieces of the story, how Aiden's dad worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to support him. How the man never missed a training letter, never missed a check-in call, never missed a chance to remind Aiden that he believed in him. But Aiden himself didn't know much more than that. Mason never talked about the service, never talked about Iraq, never talked about anything before he became a janitor. Aiden had always assumed it was a soft chapter, not a dark one. Aiden scanned the rows again. Families dressed in suits, dresses, military uniforms. Nothing. His jaw tightened. "Where are you, Dad?" Back at the gate. Mason leaned forward slightly as the cadence music began. Flags unfurled. Officers took their positions. The crowd rose in applause as the graduating class marched in. Mason didn't stand to see better. He didn't push closer. He simply straightened his posture in his little metal chair, hands clasped, eyes glistening. From this far, Aiden couldn't possibly see him, but Mason saw everything. Every step, every salute, every moment his son had earned with sweat, grit, and heart. And though he sat alone, overlooked, and forgotten at the edge of the base, Mason's chest swelled with a quiet pride that needed no audience. A pride that came from loving without conditions. A pride that came from sacrifice no one else would ever know. A pride that was about to shake the entire ceremony. But for now, the quiet man at the gate simply watched and waited. The low hum of anticipation swept across the parade grounds as the graduating class stood tall in perfect formation. The brass band played a steady rhythm, flags snapped crisply in the coastal breeze, and the sun climbed higher, casting a soft glow across the sea of proud families. But Aiden Cole barely noticed any of it. He was standing in the second row of the formation, chin up, shoulders, squared uniform immaculate. But his eyes scanned the bleachers again and again, searching for a single familiar face. The one face that mattered. His father's. He leaned slightly to the side as the line shifted. Maybe he had missed him earlier. Maybe Mason had slipped in late. Maybe he was standing behind someone taller. Maybe nothing. Just bright dresses, suits, uniforms, sunglasses, and phones being lifted for photos. Aiden swallowed hard. His teammates noticed. "You're looking around like your dad owes you lunch money," one whispered without turning his head. Aiden exhaled through his nose. He said he'd be here. "Maybe he's hiding because he's emotional," another teammate joked. Parents cry at this thing all the time, even the tough ones. A few soft chuckles rippled through the platoon, but Aiden didn't laugh. He kept scanning. His father wasn't the emotional type. Mason Cole was steady, composed, almost stoic at times, but he was never unreliable, never absent. Never someone who let his son down. If he's not here yet, Aiden murmured, it means he's stuck at the gate or something. He's probably arguing with a guard trying to let him in. The first teammate raised an eyebrow. Arguing. Your dad? Aiden paused, then sighed. Okay. He's probably being extremely polite and letting them walk all over him then. That sounded more like Mason, a man who would take the long road, shoulder the weight quietly, and never make a scene even when he was right. Aiden shook his head and tried to focus as the master of ceremony stepped up to the podium. But even with the commander's voice echoing across the parade ground, Aiden's thoughts drifted. He could still remember the first time he told his dad he wanted to join the Navy. Mason hadn't smiled. He hadn't discouraged him either. He just sat across the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, and asked, "Is this your dream or mine?" Aiden never forgot that question. He had answered honestly, "It's mine." And Mason, after a long silence, nodded and said only, "Then you chase it. I'll carry what you can't." But that was the thing, Mason never talked about what he had once carried. The medals, the trauma, the deployments, the scars. Aiden only knew fragments. When he had asked about Iraq, his father's eyes always drifted into a quiet, distant place, like he was looking at ghosts no one else could see. So Aiden had stopped asking. Today, though, he wanted his father here. Not for photos, not for recognition. Just to meet his eyes from the crowd, to see that quiet nod Mason always gave him, a silent message that said, "I'm proud of you, son." Aiden's jaw tightened. Where was he? Back at the gate. Mason remained seated on the metal chair, hands folded neatly, posture slightly forward, as if leaning into the moment. He could hear the speeches begin, the applause. Rise, the officers call out names. But he remained still, invisible to most, but deeply connected to everything that was unfolding before him. Occasionally, someone walking by would glance at him, curious, puzzled, but no one asked who he was. No one recognized the tattoo beneath his sleeve, the one faded with time, but still unmistakable to those who knew its meaning. A symbol once whispered about in hushed tones, Ghost Medic. But Mason didn't come here to be recognized. He came here to witness his son's beginning. Even from this distance, he could see a sliver of Aiden's row. He watched the young man shift slightly, looking around, searching. Mason's chest tightened. He's looking for me. A warmth and ache mixed inside him. He had promised himself he would keep a low profile today, to stay out of the way, to let Aiden shine, without the shadow of his father's past. He didn't realize how tall his son had grown, how strong his posture had become, how Aiden's eyes carried the same unwavering determination Mason once had at his age. Except Aiden had something Mason never did. A future. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC announced from the stage today, we honor the newest graduates of Basic Underwater, Demolition SEAL Training Class, 324. The crowd erupted into applause. Parents stood clapping with pride and tears in their eyes. Aiden didn't clap. He didn't move. His gaze swept the perimeter again, past grandparents, waving flags, past siblings, cheering past officers in white, and then toward the very edge of the courtyard. And then he froze. A figure. Sitting alone, wearing a green janitor uniform, head slightly bowed, shoulders, calm hands clasped. Even from a distance he recognized the posture, that silhouette, the way the man's hair brushed his shoulders. Dad Aiden whispered, breath catching. One of his teammates tilted his head. You find him? Aiden nodded, eyes softening with relief. Yeah, I see him. His teammate smiled. Then focus. He's here. He came. Aiden pulled a breath deep into his chest. The ache that had been sitting in his stomach faded. His father wasn't late. His father wasn't absent. His father was simply being his father. Quiet. humble, present in the way that mattered. And for the first time since the ceremony began, Aiden allowed himself to smile. The speeches continued. Officers moved through the order of events. The program unfolded exactly as planned. But beneath all the ceremony, beneath the polished salutes and orchestrated transitions, something else pulsed silently across the crowd. A glance from a son hidden in formation. A quiet nod from a father tucked away at the edge of the base. A bond invisible to everyone else, but unbreakable. A bond that was seconds away from colliding with fate. And with an Admiral's glance that would change everything. Admiral Sarah Whitmore stood with perfect posture behind Master Chief Samuel Grant, her white uniform immaculate ribbons catching the morning light like small shards of history. She had attended dozens of buds graduations throughout her career, but today something in the air felt different, an undercurrent she couldn't quite explain. Her expression remained composed, but her mind, as always, was alert. Even on ceremonial days, an admiral's senses never truly rested. As Grant stepped forward to begin his address, Sarah kept her attention on the crowd, scanning for any disruptions, any unexpected movements, and also quietly for the faces of the families who had sacrificed so much to stand in those seats. Parents with trembling hands, mothers clinging to folded programs, siblings bouncing with excitement, veterans standing tall with pride. She respected them all. She had lived her entire career believing that the families were the unseen backbone of every warrior who stepped forward to serve. But then her gaze drifted farther, beyond the rows of chairs, beyond the banners, beyond the official boundaries of the ceremony. Movement, a figure, alone. Her eyes narrowed. At the very edge of the base sat a man on a metal folding chair, quiet and still. He wore a faded green janitor's uniform, boots worn from years of labor. His posture was unassuming, almost humble. But it was not his uniform that caught her eye. It was the ink. A swirl of faded black lines on his forearm, barely visible beneath a rolled sleeve, caught the sunlight. A pattern she recognized instantly. A symbol most people had never seen. A mark known only to a handful of people who had ever read after-action reports. So classified, they were stored in steel drawers behind steel doors. Sarah's breath stopped. No, it can't be. Her pulse thudded, once slow, heavy disbelieving. The tattoo was old, softened by time, but unmistakable, a winged serpent, coiled around a staff, flanked by two sharp black lines. A symbol burned into covert medical history. The mark of Ghost Medic. Her jaw tightened subtly, lips parting just enough to draw a sharp breath. A wave of disbelief washed through her chest. What is he doing here? Why isn't he on the guest list? Why is no one escorting him? Master Chief Grant, still mid-speech on the stage, noticed Sarah's sudden shift in energy. His experience had taught him to pay attention to the slightest change in an admiral's demeanor. Without turning his head, he whispered, "Ma'am." Something wrong. Sarah didn't respond immediately. She couldn't. Her eyes stayed locked on the man at the edge of the base, his calm posture, his steady breathing, the way he leaned forward as if absorbing every second of the ceremony. There was no arrogance in him, no awareness of his significance. He simply watched. He looks older, tired. But that's him. It had to be. Ghost Medic. The man from the classified report that had circulated quietly through the highest levels of command. The corpsman who saved an entire SEAL fire team in Fallujah. The medic whose calm voice had guided younger soldiers through the darkest, bloodiest nights. The man rumored to have vanished after the war, refusing recognition, refusing the spotlight, refusing everything. The man who saved Master Chief Grant's life. Sarah swallowed hard. She leaned slightly toward Grant. Her voice, though low, trembled with something between awe and urgency. "Master Chief, look to your right, past the bleachers, near the gate." Grant continued speaking to the crowd, but his eyes flickered toward the edge of the parade ground. And froze. Completely froze. His voice hitched. He missed half a beat in the speech. The silence that followed felt unnatural, so unnatural, that several officers shifted in confusion. Grant's grip tightened around the podium. "Ma'am," he whispered, unable to hide the shock. "Is that Sarah?" Nodded slowly, her breath unsteady for the first time in years. "Yes, that's Mason Cole." Grant's face drained of color. He knew exactly who that was. The man who dragged him from the rubble. The man who sealed his wounds with shaking hands while mortar rounds fell like hellfire. The man who disappeared before the commendation could be issued. Ghost medic. And here he was, sitting alone, in a janitor's uniform, outside the ceremony of his own son. Grant blinked hard, trying to contain the surge of emotion swelling in his chest. Standing still, pretending nothing had happened, was impossible. A man like Mason Cole didn't just appear. He emerged. Sarah spoke again, voice quiet but firm. "Master Chief, you need to." But she didn't get to finish, because Grant suddenly stepped away from the podium. Just stepped away. Mid-speech, mid-ceremony. The crowd collectively inhaled confused murmurs rippling through the rows like a wave. On the stage, officers exchanged startled glances. The band faltered. Aiden's entire row stiffened. Grant's boots thudded heavily down the wooden steps. Every eye followed him. He didn't walk with the slow, ceremonial grace expected of a Master Chief at graduation. He walked with purpose, with disbelief, with something close to reverence. Sarah descended behind him, maintaining composure, but unable to mask the rising storm inside her chest. From Aiden's formation line, whispers began buzzing. "What's happening? Why's the Master Chief leaving the stage? Is that allowed? Who's he going to?" Aiden swallowed, confused, until he followed their gaze, and saw Grant walking straight toward the man sitting alone near the gate, toward his father. The world around him blurred. His pulse thundered. Dad. It felt impossible. There was no way the highest-ranking enlisted SEAL on base was walking toward Mason Cole. No way. Aiden's heart hammered harder as realization crept into his bones. Cold, electric, undeniable. Something was happening. Something huge. Something he didn't understand. Meanwhile, Mason remained seated, unaware of the tidal wave forming around him. He leaned forward slightly, eyes softening as he caught sight of Aiden, standing proudly in formation. He didn't see Grant approaching. He didn't see Sarah following behind. He didn't see hundreds of heads slowly turning his way. He only saw his son, the boy he raised, the young man he cherished, the reason he had survived years of unseen battles. And he had no idea that his quiet world was seconds away from exploding, because the Admiral had seen his tattoo, and nothing would ever be the same again. For a heartbeat, the entire parade ground seemed to pause, caught in a strange, suspended silence that didn't belong in a graduation ceremony. The band quieted. The murmurs faded. Even the coastal wind seemed to hesitate, as if waiting for something inevitable. Master Chief Samuel Grant stepped off the stage with heavy, deliberate strides, each one echoing across the concrete. His face was pale eyes, fixed on the lone figure sitting at the edge of the base. Admiral Sarah Whitmore followed half a step behind, maintaining her composure, but her gaze was locked on Mason Cole, with a rare intensity she rarely revealed in public. Aiden Cole, still standing in formation, felt his breath catch as he watched the two most powerful figures on the field walk away from the podium in perfect unison toward the man he had spent his whole life trying to understand. Toward Dad. Why, how confusion twisted in Aiden's chest. Grant never left the stage during graduation, ever. For any reason. He was a living legend, a man whose discipline had defined generations of SEALs. But now he was abandoning protocol-breaking ceremony to walk toward a janitor sitting alone near the gate. Aiden's heartbeat pounded against his ribs. This can't be real," he whispered. His teammate nudged him. "Dude, is that your dad?" Aiden didn't answer. He couldn't. Meanwhile, Mason Cole remained seated, completely unaware that hundreds of eyes were shifting toward him. He was too focused, too absorbed watching his son on the field. He didn't notice the sudden hush in the crowd or the subtle tension rolling off the officers. He only noticed the breeze rustling the flags, the sound of Aiden's name being read from the roster, the pride rising in his chest. But then he sensed movement. Boots, heavy, purposeful, approaching. Mason looked up and froze. Master Chief Samuel Grant, broad-shouldered uniform, sharp face marked by decades of service, was closing the distance, his expression a blend of astonishment and something that almost resembled reverence. Mason blinked, confused. No, he can't be coming to me. There must be someone else behind me. He pushed against the chair, preparing to stand and step aside. But Grant stopped directly in front of him. Petty Officer Mason Cole Grant. Said voice, low, steady but trembling with emotion he could no longer contain. "It's really you." Mason felt the breath leave his chest. The words struck him like a memory he wasn't ready to relive. His eyes slowly lifted to meet Grant's eyes he had last seen through smoke dust and blood nearly 2 decades ago. "Master Chief," Mason whispered, barely audible. "You recognize me?" Grant's jaw tightened. How could I forget the man who saved my life? Behind him, Admiral Sarah Whitmore stood in quiet awe. Even she, controlled, composed, unshakably disciplined, felt the impact of the moment settle deep into her bones. Mason shook his head gently. "I'm just a janitor now, sir." "You're mistaken." "No." Grant's voice hardened, echoing with authority sharp enough to cut through doubt. "There is no mistake. I would know that tattoo anywhere." He pointed at Mason's arm. "Ghost medic." Gasps rippled through the audience. Several officers exchanged stunned looks. A few enlisted men whispered fiercely among themselves. "Ghost medic. The one from Fallujah. The one who vanished." Aiden's breath came in quick, shallow bursts. His vision blurred around the edges. Ghost medic. His father. The man who had never told him anything about his service. The man he thought had lived an ordinary military life before becoming a janitor. It didn't make sense. It didn't feel real. But it was. On stage, the MC stood frozen, uncertain what to do. Never in any ceremony had the Master Chief abandoned the podium. Parents craned their necks, whispering louder now. Who is he? Why is Grant addressing a janitor? What's happening? Even the flag detail broke discipline for a fraction of a second, glancing toward the commotion. The moment crescendoed, with Sarah stepping forward. She leaned into Grant, whispering, "Are you certain Grant didn't look away from Mason?" "With my life, ma'am." Mason stood slowly rising from the metal chair with quiet dignity, but his posture was tense, uncomfortable with the tension he had spent years avoiding. Master Chief Mason said softly, "I didn't come here for recognition. I just wanted to see my son graduate." Grant's expression softened with an emotion that felt like gratitude, guilt, admiration all blending together. "And he will. But not as the son of just a janitor." He turned halfway toward the audience, but Sarah was quicker. Her voice, calm yet commanding, carried effortlessly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Whitmore announced, "please remain seated." Her tone silenced the last remnants of whispers. "Mason Cole is not merely a guest here today," she continued. "He is a hero whose service is known only at the highest levels. A man whose actions saved an entire SEAL team during one of the most devastating firefights of the Iraq War. A stunned silence fell. Mason's face tightened with discomfort. "Admiral, please." "Not today, petty officer," Sarah said softly but with steel in her voice. "Today the truth stands with you." Grant inhaled sharply, stepping forward. "Ghost medic," he said louder this time, voice cracking with emotion. "I owe you everything. We all do." Mason opened his mouth, perhaps to disagree, perhaps to escape. But Grant did something no one expected. He snapped to attention and saluted. Not as a formality, not as ceremony, but as a man honoring the person who saved his life. The crowd erupted, gasps, shock, even a few tears. Aiden felt something break open inside him. Something old. Something aching. Something he never knew he needed to understand. His father, his quiet, humble father, was a legend, and the world was just beginning to realize it. Mason swallowed hard, throat tight, eyes stinging. Memories he buried under years of silence surged back. Dustfire screams, his hands covered in blood, not his own. He didn't want this attention, but he couldn't run from it anymore. Not while his son stood watching. Not while truth demanded its place. Grant lowered his salute slowly and spoke with conviction that silenced even the wind. "Welcome home, Mason." And for the first time in 2 decades, Mason Cole had no idea what to say. For several long seconds, no one breathed. The entire crowd, officers, parents, recruits, instructors, seemed frozen inside a single moment that felt too large, too impossible, too unbelievable to grasp. The Master Chief of Naval Special Warfare had just saluted a janitor. The Admiral had spoken his name with reverence, and everything Aiden Cole thought he knew about his father shattered like glass. From his position in formation, Aiden felt the world tilt. His pulse thundered in his ears, and he had to blink several times just to steady his vision. He wasn't imagining it. His father. The quiet man who packed his lunches, the man who worked 2 jobs, the man who never raised his voice, never demanded attention, never wanted anyone to look at him twice. Was Ghost Medic. Ghost Medic, the medic whispered about in some SEAL circles like a myth. A man his instructors spoke of with awe, always with phrases like, "He saved a whole team by himself. He worked under fire like he was born for it. He patched men up with nothing but grit and God. He vanished before command could even pin a medal on him." Aiden's knees nearly buckled. He knew his dad was humble. But this was beyond humility. This was a truth so enormous it felt like trying to hold a tidal wave in his hands. Back near the gate, Mason stood rooted to the ground, eyes lowered, as every ounce of unwanted attention pressed in around him like a storm. Grant's salute alone had already ripped open a part of Mason's past he spent years locking away. He never wanted this. Never wanted people to know. Never wanted a title or recognition. He only wanted to see his son graduate. Master Chief Mason murmured, voice rough. "You shouldn't have done that." Grant didn't flinch. "It's 20 years overdue." Mason inhaled slowly. "I'm not that man anymore." Grant's eyes softened, deep lines around them tightening with emotion. "Mason, you didn't stop being that man. You just stopped letting the world see it." Before Mason could answer, Admiral Sarah Whitmore stepped forward, closer than she had ever stood to any civilian. "Petty Officer Cole," she said gently, "your service record never received closure. But your actions, they echo through every unit that survived because of you." Mason shook his head. "Ma'am, I'm just here for my son. And he's about to see who you truly are," Sarah replied. Her eyes sharp with command, yet warm with sincerity, held his for a moment, that felt strangely grounding. She turned to Grant and gave a firm nod, the kind that signaled a decision had just been made. Grant inhaled deeply, faced the crowd, and raised his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, officers and families, His voice boomed, rich with authority. "Before we proceed with today's graduation, it is my duty, my honor to acknowledge someone whose presence here is nothing short of extraordinary." The crowd leaned forward. Mason closed his eyes for a second. "Please." "No." But it was already happening. Grant continued. "This man saved my life during Fallujah 2007. When our team was pinned down, when we were outnumbered and out of options, he crawled through open fire twice to pull us out." A collective gasp rippled through the bleachers. Aiden's chest tightened so hard it hurt. Grant's voice grew stronger. He treated wounds with his bare hands, using torn pieces of his own uniform when supplies ran out. He kept 11 SEALs alive while the city burned around us. Whispers spread like wind through dry grass. "That can't be." 11. No one survives that. "Who is he again, Ghost Medic?" "He's real." Sarah stepped beside Grant. She didn't take the microphone, but she didn't have to. Her presence was enough to command silence. Grant turned toward Mason. "Petty Officer Mason Cole. Ghost Medic, please step forward." Mason's stomach dropped. He lifted a hand, subconsciously shaking it in refusal. "Master Chief, please. I'm not here for..." But Sarah's voice cut in softly, firmly. "Mason." He stopped. No one had said his name like that in years. Sarah held his gaze. "Let us honor what you carried so others could live." Her eyes weren't commanding him. They were inviting him. Respectful. Human. Slowly, with reluctance, stitched into every step, Mason walked forward. The crowd parted instinctively. Parents stepping back. Sailors straightening, instructors lowering their hats. Every pair of eyes followed him. And for a man who spent his life avoiding attention, the weight of their gaze felt like a physical burden. He stopped beside Grant. "Mason Grant," said, voice cracking, "you saved my life. You saved my men. You saved their families, their children." His voice grew raw. "I never got to say thank you." Mason stared at the ground. "I did what I had to do." Grant put a hand over his heart. "No. You did what only you could do." The words echoed like a judgment final, undeniable. Up on stage, the MC whispered to the nearest officer. "Who is that man?" The officer whispered back, voice barely audible. "A legend." Aiden felt his throat tighten. His vision blurred again, but this time with tears he didn't try to hide. He whispered to himself, voice trembling, "Dad. Why didn't you tell me?" Because Mason never wanted the world to look at him differently. Because he wanted his son to grow without shadows, or pressure, or expectations. Because some heroes aren't built for applause. They're built to heal, to protect, to love from the quiet places. The ceremony stood still as Grant turned once more toward the crowd and said words that ignited the air. "This man, this father, this hero is the reason I'm standing here today." The silence that followed was deep, reverent, and soul-shaking. Mason closed his eyes, overwhelmed. Sarah watched him with a softness in her gaze, a mix of admiration, empathy, and something tender she couldn't hide. And in that moment, as Mason stood under the California sun, exposed before hundreds, he wasn't Ghost Medic. He wasn't a former corpsman. He wasn't a janitor. He was simply a man who carried a lifetime of sacrifices in silence. A man whose quiet world had been blown wide open. A man whose truth had finally come for him. And he had no choice but to face it. For Aiden Cole, the ceremony dissolved into a blur. Voices movement, applause, sunlight bouncing off medals, none of it landed. None of it made sense. The world narrowed to a tunnel, and at the end of it stood only one image, his father. Standing beside the Master Chief, standing beneath the Admiral's gaze, standing before hundreds of people who now knew more about him than Aiden ever had. Every memory he had of Mason, every quiet morning breakfast, every tired smile after a long shift. Every lesson about humility shifted under the weight of the revelation that had cracked open the truth. Ghost Medic wasn't a story. Ghost Medic wasn't a myth. Ghost Medic was his father. And Mason had never said a word. Aiden's hands trembled at his sides as instructors continued the ceremony, trying unsuccessfully to steer things back on track. His teammates whispered, stunned, "Bro, your dad is Ghost Medic." "No way. Ghost Medic was like Special Forces level legendary. That's insane. Why would he be a janitor? Why didn't he say anything?" Aiden swallowed hard, throat tight. I didn't know. The admission tasted like failure, not because his father lied. Mason never lied. But because Aiden had never seen it, never sensed it, never understood the storm behind his father's calm eyes. The ceremony marched forward, names being called, medals, pinned honors, given, but Aiden heard none of it. His gaze was locked on Mason, who stood stiffly beside Grant. Face calm, but eyes shadowed by something deeper, something private, something painful. "Dad, why did you hide this? Why didn't you trust me?" When his name was finally called, Aiden Cole. The crowd erupted in applause, but Aiden didn't beam with pride. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his chin with confidence. He walked toward the stage feeling hollow. He caught a glimpse of Mason, his father, watching him with the soft, steady eyes Aiden had known his whole life. The gaze of a man who loved with everything he had. But today, that gaze made Aiden's chest ache. He climbed the steps, took his certificate, saluted the Admiral and Master Chief, both of whom regarded him with quiet respect, and then turned sharply toward Mason. Their eyes met. Not as janitor and son, not as veteran and recruit, not even as father and child, but as two men standing on opposite sides of a truth too big to ignore. Aiden's breath hitched, and then his control snapped. He stepped down from the stage boots, striking the ground with barely contained frustration. The moment the formalities ended and graduates were released to join their families, Aiden moved quickly, almost running toward his father. People parted instinctively. Some moved out of admiration, some out of fear of the intensity in Aiden's eyes. Mason saw him coming and braced himself. Aiden stopped inches from him, chest rising and falling. Jaw clenched so tight it trembled. "Dad," he whispered, voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mason opened his mouth, but no words emerged. Aiden stepped closer, fists tight at his sides. "All these years, all the stories, all the questions you avoided? You let me think you were just a janitor," Mason finished quietly. "A janitor," Aiden echoed, voice cracking. "When you were out there saving lives, when you were a hero." Mason's eyes softened with grief. "Son, I didn't want you to carry the weight of my past. I didn't want you to feel pressure. I wanted you to choose your own path, not walk mine. But I didn't even know your path." Aiden's voice rose raw and vulnerable. "How am I supposed to understand who I am if I don't even know who you are?" The crowd fell into a reverent hush. Parents paused mid-celebration, sensing the emotional storm. Grant and Sarah exchanged a quiet glance, but did not intervene. They knew this moment was sacred, painful, necessary, and deeply human. Aiden's voice came softer, now trembling. "Dad, were you ever going to tell me?" Mason finally spoke softly, steadily, the way he always did. "Aiden, the things I saw, the men I lost, the parts of me I had to bury to come home alive. I didn't want that darkness to follow you." Aiden blinked rapidly, tears spilling over. "I joined the SEALs because I wanted to make you proud. I thought I was trying to live up to a simple man who worked hard and kept going no matter what." His voice cracked. "But all this time, I was living in the shadow of someone I didn't even know." Mason stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Aiden's shoulder. "You were never in my shadow, son." Aiden shook his head. "Then why keep me in the dark?" Mason's eyes glistened. "Because I didn't want you to feel like you had to become me. I wanted you to have the space, the freedom, to become you. Not Ghost Medic's son, just Aiden Cole." Aiden shut his eyes, tears streaming. "I would have been proud of you, if you had told me." Mason's breath shuddered. "And I would have been proud of you no matter what path you chose. Even if you never enlisted. Even if you became a teacher or a mechanic or anything else. My pride in you was never tied to this uniform." Aiden opened his eyes, pain still present, but something else beginning to emerge. Understanding. He stared at his father for a long moment. Mason's shoulders were slightly slumped, as if he carried a lifetime of burdens alone. The tattoos on his arm, the ones Aiden always thought were just remnants of a young man's mistakes, now told stories he had never heard. Slowly, Aiden's anger melted into something deeper. Aiden stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. "I wish you didn't carry it alone." The words hit Mason harder than any battlefield wound. His breath broke, his eyes burned, his voice came out trembling. "I didn't know how else to protect you." Aiden exhaled shakily and closed the distance between them, pulling his father into a tight, fierce embrace. Mason's arms hesitated at first, then wrapped around his son with the kind of strength that could hold a whole world together. For a moment, time stopped. The crowd watched silently, tears in many eyes, as a father and son bridged a lifetime in a single embrace. Aiden whispered into Mason's shoulder, "I'm not angry anymore, just hurt. But I'm proud of you, Dad. So proud." Mason's tears finally fell. "And I'm proud of you, son. Always." Amid the applause, the whispers, and the awe surrounding them, father and son stood locked in a moment that would forever define their lives. Not as Ghost Medic and SEAL graduate, but as a father and a son who finally saw each other clearly. The applause swelled across the parade grounds, not the loud and rowdy kind, but the warm, reverent kind, the kind that carried emotion deeper than celebration. Graduates were proud. Parents were tearful. Officers stood straighter without realizing it. Something sacred had shifted in the air when Mason and Aiden embraced. Master Chief Samuel Grant stepped forward again, a man wrestling between tradition and the undeniable truth unfolding right before him. He cleared his throat, reclaiming the microphone with a steadiness that returned only after several heartbeats. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his deep voice resonating through the ceremony, "before we continue today's program, there is something more that must be acknowledged." Mason stiffened slightly. He turned to step back, to retreat quietly into the crowd, where he felt he belonged, but Grant lifted a hand, firm, unmistakable. "Petty Officer Cole, please remain here." Aiden squeezed his father's shoulder. Mason attempted a small smile to reassure him, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed his discomfort. Admiral Sarah Whitmore stepped beside Grant, her presence commanding attention without a single word. She nodded toward Mason, with a subtle encouragement that felt strangely grounding. Grant continued, "This ceremony is about honoring our graduates, their courage, their commitment, their sacrifices." He paused, letting the emphasis settle. "But today, we also stand in the presence of someone whose sacrifices shaped the very spirit of this community. Someone who lived the words we teach and preach, not for praise, not for recognition, but because it was right." Sarah stepped forward, taking the microphone, a rarity in itself. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that rippled across the field. "We honor bravery in uniform," Sarah said. "But sometimes, the greatest bravery happens in silence." A hush fell deeper. Mason Cole served as a corpsman during one of the most volatile periods of the Iraq War. Reports, though redacted and hidden for years, describe a moment when one man kept an entire team of SEALs alive against impossible odds. She turned to Mason. No medals, no commendations, no spotlight. Only a choice. A choice to risk his life for the lives of others. The audience leaned forward as if pulled by her words. And today Sarah continued. He stands before us not as ghost medic, not as a legend from the shadows, but as a father who came simply to watch his son graduate. Soft murmurs of admiration echoed through the rows. Mason shifted uncomfortably. "Admiral, please. This isn't necessary." Sarah met his eyes. "It is." Then she turned, addressing Aiden directly. "And Petty Officer Aiden Cole, your father's courage is not separate from yours. It flows through you. It shaped the man standing in formation today, and the Navy owes him a moment of gratitude." Grant stepped in, voice deep and steady. "Petty Officer Mason Cole, would you join us on stage?" Mason's eyes widened. "No. No, Master Chief. This is Aiden's day." "Please don't." Aiden placed a firm hand on his father's arm. "Dad, please, go." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of forgiveness, pride, and a new understanding forming between them. Mason swallowed hard. He wasn't a man accustomed to spotlights. He wasn't built for stages. He was built for back rooms and dim hallways, for healing others, in chaos for carrying burdens no one else saw. But his son needed him to step forward. So he did. He followed Grant and Sarah as they guided him toward the stage, each step heavier than the last. The crowd parted like water eyes, filling with admiration he didn't feel he deserved. When he reached the steps, Mason hesitated just for a breath, a single heartbeat, before climbing. A wave of applause rose soft at first, then swelling as recognition of the moment spread. Mason had never looked so humble, or so exposed. Grant placed a hand on his shoulder. "Say something," he murmured. "Anything." Mason stepped up to the microphone. He didn't grip it. He let his hands fall at his sides. His posture, though hesitant, was steady. For a moment, he stared at the sea of faces, hundreds of people watching him, waiting. And then, his eyes found Aiden. That was enough. He drew a breath, voice low but strong. "I'm not a man of speeches," Mason began. "I'm not even sure I'm the man everyone here thinks I am." A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. "I've lived a quiet life, some days by choice, some days because I couldn't carry what came before." He paused. "But every day, I tried to be the kind of father my son deserved." Aiden blinked rapidly, eyes stinging. I didn't tell Aiden about my past because I didn't want it to be a weight on his shoulders. I didn't want him to chase my footsteps or feel the pressure to outgrow them. He gave a sad, soft smile. I wanted him to walk toward his future without looking over his shoulder at mine. Mason inhaled deeply, voice thickening. "War teaches you many things. It teaches you that life is fragile, that brothers can be lost in a heartbeat. That's survival." He paused, swallowing. "Survival isn't the end. You still have to live with why you survived." A few veterans in the crowd nodded knowingly, their eyes moist. "But it also teaches you something else. If you're lucky, if you're blessed, it teaches you what you're living for." He turned toward Aiden, voice trembling openly now. "My reason was always my son." A hushed silence followed, heavy, full aching. Mason wiped a hand over his jaw, exhaled, and finished softly. "If I did anything right in my life, it was raising him, and seeing him standing here today, becoming something greater than I ever dreamed. That is the real honor." The crowd erupted, not with wild cheering, but with a standing ovation, that rose slowly, then grew unstoppable. A wave of respect, admiration, gratitude. Aiden stood at full attention, tears running freely. Sarah's hand hovered near her heart. Grant wiped his eyes quickly and pretended he wasn't. Mason Cole, ghost medic janitor father, stood on stage in the blinding California sunlight, every wound inside him exposed. But somehow, for the first time in decades, the weight he carried felt lighter. Because truth had finally found him. Because honor had returned to him. Because love, quiet, steadfast love, had brought him here. And because his son was proud. The ceremony slowly resumed after Mason's speech, but the atmosphere had shifted. No longer was the graduation just a celebration of young warriors completing their training. It had become something deeper, something almost sacred. People looked at Mason with a kind of reverent awe, like they were witnessing the quiet unveiling of a legend who never wanted to be known. But as the crowd filtered into groups, families embracing graduates, photographers snapping pictures, officers offering congratulations, Mason slipped gently away from the center of attention. He preferred the edges, the quiet corners where he could breathe. Old habits never died. They simply waited. He stood near one of the tall palm trees bordering the ceremony field, gazing at the coastline beyond the fence. Aiden was surrounded by teammates, officers, and civilians eager to shake his hand and congratulate him. Mason watched with quiet pride, letting Aiden enjoy the spotlight he earned. Then soft footsteps approached behind him. "Mason," a voice said, warm, measured, unmistakably strong. He turned and found Admiral Sarah Whitmore standing a few feet away, hands clasped behind her back, posture relaxed, but still undeniably regal. The California sunlight glinted off her ribbons and rank insignia. Her expression, though composed, held something gentler, now a softness he hadn't noticed before. Admiral Mason said quietly, straightening out of instinct. She shook her head. "No need for that now. We're just two people having a conversation." Mason took a slow breath and nodded. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind rustled the leaves above them, and distant cheers echoed from the gathering families. It was a pocket of stillness in the midst of celebration. "You disappeared after Fallujah." Sarah finally said, her voice low, almost cautious, not the tone of an admiral, but of a woman stepping carefully into someone else's pain. No forwarding address, no request for recognition. Nothing. Mason's gaze drifted out toward the ocean where waves broke gently along the shore. "I didn't disappear," he said softly. "I just went home." To what she asked gently. He hesitated. Then, to a boy who needed his father alive more than the world needed another hero. Sarah's eyes softened even more. Aiden was young then. He was 10. Mason's voice wavered just slightly, barely. He had already lost his mother. I couldn't let him lose me, too. Sarah inhaled deeply but quietly. She had read the files, the reports tucked deep inside classified archives, but they told only pieces of a larger truth. They didn't tell the story of the man standing in front of her now. "Why didn't you tell him?" she asked. About the war, Mason let out a faint breath that almost resembled a laugh. "Because I didn't want him to know what I had done. Or what I failed to do." "You saved 11 men," Sarah said firmly. Mason's jaw tightened. "And I couldn't save the 12th. There it was, the truth, buried beneath all the praise, all the admiration, all the silence." Sarah saw the shadow cross his face, the old wound that time had never truly healed. A quiet ache settled in her chest. "Mason," she said softly, "every battlefield has ghosts." He looked at her eyes, tired but honest. "Ghost medic wasn't a title of honor, Admiral. It was what they called me because I kept showing up through things no one should have survived." "And yet you did," she whispered. "And yet I did," he echoed, voice strained. But surviving doesn't mean you walk away whole. So I chose to step back. I chose to build a quiet life. I chose to give Aiden something better than what the war left of me. Sarah took a slow step closer, close enough that Mason could see the delicate lines around her eyes, the marks of her own battles, her own scars. "You built him into the man he is," Sarah said, "and that man, your son, stood there today because of the foundation you laid. Not because you were a medic, not because you were a soldier, but because you were a father." The words settled on Mason like a balm he didn't expect. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, not at first. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and gravelly. "I just wanted him to have a chance at a life without carrying my past." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now." Mason exhaled, the weight inside his chest shifting. "Now I hope he understands I never meant to shut him out." Sarah studied him for a long moment. There was admiration in her eyes. Yes, but also something deeper. Something bordering on tenderness. "You know," she said gently, "I've met many men with medals and rank and glory. But what you did, what you've quietly carried all these years, takes a kind of courage most people never see." A faint blush rose beneath Mason's beard, though he tried to hide it. "I'm not sure about that, Admiral," she smiled softly. "Call me Sarah." Mason froze. He hadn't expected that. He certainly hadn't earned that. "Sarah," she repeated slower this time, as if offering a hand. Mason swallowed. "All right. Sarah." The name felt strange in his mouth, intimate in a way he wasn't prepared for. But not uncomfortable. Not unwelcome. Sarah glanced toward Aiden, who was still surrounded by people, but kept glancing back toward his father, making sure he hadn't disappeared again. "You raised a fine young man," Sarah said quietly. "He raised himself in a lot of ways," Mason replied. "I just tried not to get in his way." "That's not what he believes," Sarah said. Mason followed her gaze. Aiden had just broken away from his teammates and was walking back toward them. "Looks like you're about to find out," Sarah murmured. Before Mason could respond, Aiden reached them, still looking a bit like a man standing between two worlds, his old understanding of his father and the new truth that had reshaped everything. "Dad," Aiden said softly, glancing between Mason and the Admiral. "You okay?" Mason nodded. "I am." Aiden looked relieved, then awkward as he realized he'd interrupted something. "Oh, Admiral Whitmore." Aiden straightened. "Thank you for, well, everything." Sarah gave him a warm nod. "Congratulations, Petty Officer Cole. Your future is bright." Aiden smiled shyly. "Thank you, ma'am." She turned back to Mason. "We'll talk again soon." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even an order. It was a promise. And then she walked away, her white uniform glowing against the sun, her presence lingering like a soft melody that refused to fade. Aiden looked at his father, eyes searching. "You talked to the Admiral?" he asked carefully. Mason nodded. "Yeah, just talked." Aiden lifted an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, he stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Dad, can we, talk? Just us later." Mason smiled, small, warm, real. "Yeah, I'd like that." And for the first time that day, an ease settled between them. Not perfect, not fully healed yet, but beginning. A quiet beginning. A new beginning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, turning the celebration into something warm and golden. Families still mingled, some taking photos beside the giant Bud-S emblem, some laughing with instructors, others wiping away tears that kept returning, no matter how often they tried to blink them back. Mason stood beside Aiden now, quietly observing everything with a kind of peaceful detachment. His son, newly graduated, still wearing the sheen of ceremony on his skin, stood proudly, but kept stealing glances at his father. Every so often their eyes met, and Aiden offered a shy smile, as if slowly stitching back together the understanding between them. "Dad," Aiden murmured, nudging him. "You okay?" Mason nodded. "I'm all right." "You sure? You look like you're thinking 10 miles deep." Mason chuckled softly. "Old habit." Aiden smiled faintly, but then something at the edge of the courtyard caught Mason's eye. A figure moving slowly, using a crutch, making his way through the dispersing crowd. The man limped with deliberate effort, every step costing him something. His uniform was older, the darker shade of navy dress blues, the kind worn by retired veterans. His left leg was stiff, dragging slightly. His right sleeve was neatly pinned where an arm once had been. His jawline was marked by years of determination and more years of pain. But it was his eyes that froze Mason's breath in his throat, tired, deeply human, and full of quiet gratitude. Mason forgot the noise of the crowd, forgot the sunlight, forgot everything but the man approaching him. Because he knew that gait, he knew those eyes, he knew that face, though older, wearier, forever changed. A ghost from Fallujah walked toward him. Aiden noticed the sudden stillness in his father's body. "Dad, do you know him?" Mason couldn't answer. Not immediately. His pulse thudded in his ears. The man drew closer until he stopped only a few feet away. For a long second, neither spoke. They stood facing each other, two survivors bound by memories no one else could ever fully understand. Finally, the veteran lifted his chin. "You remember me," he said softly. Mason swallowed. His voice came out rough. "Yeah, I remember you, Travis." Aiden's eyes widened. "Travis. Corpsman Travis. Hale Navy SEAL Team Breacher, the 12th man from the stories. The one who almost didn't make it out. The one Mason thought he'd lost." Travis shifted his crutch and let out a small, shaky laugh. "You look older, Cole. Thought you'd be 10 feet tall the next time I saw you." Mason's lips twitched. "And I thought you were dead." Travis's expression softened. Almost was. A quiet pause followed, heavy, meaningful. Then Travis stepped forward and extended the one hand he still had. Mason clasped it instantly. Their grips tightened, not as greeting, but as recognition. As memory, as survival. A few people nearby turned to watch, sensing the depth of the moment without understanding it. Travis exhaled slowly. "I've been looking for you. For years. But you vanished. Dropped off the grid. No social media, no address, no reunions." Mason nodded. "I had reasons." A small, sad smile touched the corner of Travis's mouth. "Yeah, I can see them now." His eyes drifted to Aiden, tall, strong, steady. "This your boy?" Mason nodded. Aiden stepped forward with quiet respect. "Aiden Cole, sir." Travis laughed gently. "Sir, hell, kid, the only thing I'm a sir of now is my orthopedic surgeon's schedule." Then his expression softened. "You look like your dad." Aiden blinked. I never knew who he really was." "Not until today." Travis nodded, eyes warming. "Your old man saved my life." Aiden swallowed. "He saved a lot of lives." "No," Travis said firmly. "He saved mine. And that matters to me more than any legend." Mason looked away, overwhelmed, but Travis wasn't done. "I walked for my daughter's 5th birthday because of this man." His voice cracked, faintly, emotion leaking through the years of resilience. "I walked her into her first day of school. I danced with her at her 8th grade banquet, even with this bum leg. I lived to meet the boy she says she's gonna marry someday." Aiden inhaled sharply. Travis tapped the ground with his crutch. "Every one of those moments came from what your dad did for me in that hellhole. He carried me out with a leg full of shrapnel, half my blood on the sand, and my mind halfway gone. And he told me, Hale, you're not dying today." Mason closed his eyes. He remembered that day. The fire, the smoke, the screams, the loss of the 12th man Mason couldn't save, the weight he carried in silence for 20 years. Aiden's throat tightened. My dad never told me any of this. Travis nodded. Of course he didn't. That's who he is. He saves people and disappears before anyone can say thank you. The crowd around them grew quieter, sensing the unfolding story. Travis shifted his crutch. But I wasn't gonna let you disappear again, Mason. Not today. He drew a shaky breath. I wanted to tell you, my daughter's alive because you are. Mason's eyes glistened. Travis. And I wanted to tell your boy Travis turned to Aiden again, that his father is the reason a family didn't break, that his father is the reason I'm still here. Aiden felt something deep inside him loosen. A wound he didn't know he'd been carrying began to heal. Travis wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. You're a good man, Cole. You think you walked away from the battlefield alone, but you didn't. Every life you saved walked with you. Mason's breath trembled in emotion he had kept buried, finally breaking the surface. Travis grinned weakly. You disappeared before I could thank you. So I'm thanking you now. He placed a hand on Mason's shoulder. Thank you for my life. Thank you for my daughter's life. Thank you for every day I got to wake up and be a father. Mason's tears finally fell. And in that moment, in the golden light of a day, meant for young warriors, two veterans stood facing not just each other, but the years of silence, pain, and gratitude between them. Aiden stepped closer, voice trembling. Dad, you never told me because it hurt too much, Mason nodded. Aiden placed a hand on his father's arm. Then let me help carry it. Now. Mason turned eyes full of emotion and love, and for the first time in a long time, he let someone share the weight. A quiet tear slipped down Sarah Whitmore's cheek from where she watched nearby, hidden behind a group of officers. She had seen battlefield reunions before, but this one touched something deeper. A man like Mason Cole didn't just save lives, he touched souls. And his past long thought buried walked back into the light, not to haunt him, but to heal him. The ceremony had long ended. Families drifted toward the parking lot, hugging tightly, laughing loudly, lingering in small clusters, as if reluctant to let the day slip away. The sky began brushing itself in shades of amber, and rose one of those perfect California evenings that made the ocean look like it was glowing from beneath. But off to the side of the main courtyard, where the noise softened and the breeze carried only the distant call of seagulls, Mason and Aiden stood together in a quiet corner, just the two of them. A moment, 20 years overdue. Aiden's newly polished dress blues caught the dying sunlight, but his expression was softer now, no longer confused or shocked or overwhelmed. Instead, there was something deep and sincere in his eyes, something searching, something ready. Dad, Aiden said gently, breaking the silence, can we talk, really talk? Mason exhaled slowly as if bracing himself. Yeah, we can. They found an empty bench beneath a tall palm tree. Mason lowered himself carefully, elbows resting on his knees, hands folded. Aiden sat beside him, not too close at first, giving both of them a little space to breathe. For a moment, they watched the horizon together as the sun dropped lower. Then, Aiden spoke, voice soft, but sure. I'm proud of you. Mason's eyes flickered. You shouldn't be proud of things I never told you. Why not? Aiden asked gently. You did those things, Dad. You saved lives. You served with honor. Just because you never talked about it doesn't make it any less real. It's not the saving I'm ashamed of, Mason murmured. It's the parts I couldn't save. Aiden turned toward him, the 12th man. Mason flinched, not from fear, but from a wound that had never fully closed. Yes, he whispered. Corporal Jennings, young, fearless. He trusted me, and I couldn't get him out in time. Aiden's brow softened. Dad, that wasn't your fault. Mason didn't answer. His eyes were far away, trapped in memories he had buried under years of sweeping floors and fixing leaky pipes. Every night for years, Mason said quietly. I saw his face, heard the explosion, felt the sand shake beneath me. I carried 11 men back, but for 20 years all I could think about was the one I left behind. Aiden's voice grew firm, not harsh, but steady with conviction. But those 11 men lived because of you. Mason closed his eyes, breathing shakily. And you lived, Aiden continued, and I lived, because you came home to me. Mason turned his head slightly, meeting his son's gaze. Aiden's eyes glistened. You didn't come home broken, Dad. You came home brave. Mason swallowed hard. I didn't feel brave. Bravery isn't about how you feel, Aiden said, almost whispering. It's about how you act, even when you don't feel strong. The wind rustled the palm fronds above them, soft and gentle, as if listening. Aiden shifted closer, elbows brushing his father's. You know, I always thought you avoided talking about the military because it was just a rough time. I never imagined it was because you were protecting me, Mason said. I wanted you to have your own life, your own dreams. I didn't want you to be proud of me for the wrong reasons. I didn't want you to join to live up to me. Aiden let out a small laugh, shaking his head. Dad, I didn't join because of you. I joined because I wanted to honor the man who raised me, not the medic you once were. Mason's brows knit. Honor me, how Aiden smiled gently. By being good, by being steady, by being the kind of man who works hard even when no one's watching, because that's what you taught me. He paused, letting the words sink in. You taught me to show up, even when tired, even when it was hard. You taught me loyalty. You taught me kindness. His voice cracked slightly. You didn't teach me how to be a SEAL. You taught me how to be a man. Mason's breath trembled. He looked away, blinking fast. And today, Aiden continued. I understood what strength really looks like, not the kind on the battlefield, but the strength to start over. The strength to raise a kid alone. The strength to live a quiet life, even when you once lived a loud one. A single tear slipped down Mason's cheek. For years, he had held everything inside. Fear, regret, pride, love, and suddenly all that weight began to lift. Aiden gently nudged his shoulder. Dad, look at me. Mason turned. Their eyes met, father and son soldier, and graduate, two men who had each walked through fire in different ways. I'm proud to be your son, Aiden said quietly. That was the moment Mason broke. Not with dramatic sobs, but with a soft, quiet surrender. His shoulders shook, his breath hitched, and he pressed a hand to his eyes. Aiden immediately pulled him into a tight embrace, one arm around his father's broad shoulders, holding him the way Mason had held him countless times as a child. It's okay, Aiden whispered. It's okay. For the first time in decades, Mason allowed himself to be held. No battlefield, no enemy, no masks, just his son. After a long moment, Mason pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Aiden shook his head. Don't apologize, just never shut me out again. Mason nodded, voice thick. I won't. They sat together as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with oranges and purples. Aiden leaned back against the bench. Dad, do you think Mom would be proud? The question pierced straight into Mason's heart. But this time he didn't shy away. She would be proud of both of us, Mason said, his voice full of quiet certainty. She always believed you were meant for something great. Aiden smiled at that, a soft, bittersweet smile. They sat in peaceful silence until the first stars appeared overhead. Healing didn't come all at once. But tonight, something inside both of them finally began to mend. And somewhere behind them, watching from a respectful distance, hands clasped behind her back. Admiral Sarah Whitmore saw father and son begin to stitch their hearts back together. She smiled thoughtfully. She could feel the story unfolding. She could feel hope rising. And she knew this family was not done healing yet. The sun had nearly vanished beyond the horizon when the final stragglers began leaving the base, the courtyard buzzing with pride and excitement. Just an hour earlier, grew quiet, bathed in the soft glow of evening lights and the lingering warmth of the day's emotions. Aiden had been pulled away by his new team for an impromptu photo session and a promise to celebrate later. He left reluctantly, glancing back at Mason several times, as if making sure his father wouldn't disappear again. Each time Mason gave the same quiet nod. Go. Live your moment. So Mason found himself alone again, but not lonely. Not tonight. He walked toward the pier, following a path that dipped behind the ceremony grounds and opened into a breathtaking view of the Pacific. The sky was painted in hues of lavender and coral, the water shimmering like a sheet of liquid gold. The American flag at the end of the dock fluttered gently in the ocean breeze. He leaned on the wooden railing, resting his hands on the sun-worn boards, breathing in the scent of salt and calm. For the first time in years, his chest felt lighter. Not empty, not tight, just easier. Footsteps approached behind him, soft, measured, and unmistakably confident. Mason didn't need to turn around. Sarah. Admiral Whitmore stopped beside him, hands resting on the railing just far enough away to be respectful, but close enough that he could feel her presence. The breeze lifted a strand of her blonde hair across her cheek, and she brushed it back with a small, almost shy motion he'd never seen from her before. You slipped away, she said softly. I'm not good with crowds, Mason replied. You did remarkably well today. He huffed a quiet, humble laugh. That wasn't my doing. That was everything catching up to me. Sarah studied him for a moment. Does it still hurt? Talking about it, he thought carefully before answering. A little, but it hurts less when I'm not hiding from it. I'm glad she said. And she meant it. Silence settled between them, not awkward, but peaceful, like two people who didn't need to force words. Mason tilted his head, glancing sideways at her. You were kind today. Kinder than I expected an admiral to be. Sarah gave a faint smile. Rank doesn't mean I stopped being human. Some admirals would disagree. I'm not some admirals. The warmth in her tone surprised him. It was soft, genuine, a glimpse of the woman beneath the uniform. They watched the waves lap against the pilings. The world felt smaller, quieter. The ceremony, the recognition, the past, they all felt far away, now softened by the ocean's rhythm. After a few moments, Sarah spoke again. You know, she began softly. In all my years in uniform, I've met countless warriors. Men with medals, men with valor, men with scars. But very few possess the kind of humility you carry. It's not humility, Mason said. It's just trying to live without being swallowed by the past. Humility and survival can look very similar, she replied. He turned slightly toward her. What about you? You wear that uniform like it never weighs on you. Sarah's eyes drifted over the horizon. It weighs. Some days more than others. That's honest, Mason said quietly. Only because I don't owe you a polished version of myself. Their eyes met, steady, open, real. Sarah shifted her stance just slightly. What are you going to do now? Mason, for Aiden, he asked. For you. Mason exhaled. I don't know. Keep working. Keep going. Be whatever he needs me to be. Sarah nodded softly. And what do you need? He hesitated. No one had asked him that question in years. What did he need? Not medals. Not recognition. Not redemption. Not even forgiveness. He needed peace. Connection. A hand reaching back into the quiet life he had built alone. I'm not sure, Mason admitted, but I think I'm ready to find out. Sarah smiled, soft, warm, and unexpectedly beautiful. I'm glad you said that, she murmured. Mason raised a brow. Why, Sarah took a slow breath, gathering courage in a way he never would have imagined from a woman of her stature. Because if you're not busy this weekend, she said gently, I'd like to invite you to dinner. Not to talk about the war. Not about service. Not about the past. Mason blinked, stunned. Sarah continued, her voice tender and sincere. I want to talk about the future. The words lingered in the air carried by the breeze like a gentle promise. Mason swallowed emotion tightening his throat. Not fear, not doubt, but something softer. Something hopeful. I'd like that, he whispered. A soft smile touched Sarah's lips, a smile not of command or duty, but of a woman letting a door open inside herself. For now, she said, turning toward the water. Let's just watch the sunset. Mason stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. The tide rolled in. The flag above them fluttered proudly. The horizon glowed like a promise being born. Aiden approached from the distance, watching his father stand beside a woman who clearly respected him, not for the ghosts he carried, but for the man he chose to become. He smiled quietly. His father deserved this moment. Deserved peace. Deserved healing. Deserved a beginning that wasn't shaped by pain. Mason and Sarah stood side by side as the sun dipped into the Pacific, two weary souls standing at the edge of something new, and the world for just a moment felt whole. The final line of the day echoed gently in Mason's heart. Some heroes live loudly, others live quietly, but the miracles they create ripple forever. Before we close, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Your stories, your reflections, and your presence mean so much to us, and we truly enjoy reading every single comment from our community. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone you love, we warmly invite you to join our channel. Here, we share quiet, uplifting stories of kindness, courage, and the moments that shape our lives. Feel free to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for spending your time with us today. Your support and your kindness make this journey meaningful. We appreciate you more than words can say.